The First World War didn't start suddenly. It was the result of many problems that had been building up for years. The powers of Europe were in constant competition. Each country wanted to be the strongest, the richest, and the most powerful. War wasn't inevitable, but tensions grew every day. At the end of the 19th century, Europe was experiencing an arms race. Germany and the British Empire competed to have the largest fleets. France had not forgotten its defeat by Germany in 1871, and Russia was seeking to expand its influence in the Balkans. Everyone was preparing, although they didn't yet know what for. The situation in the Balkans was particularly tense. The Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires were losing power, while Serbia sought to lead the Slavic peoples. Russia supported Serbia, indirectly pitting Austria-Hungary against Russia. It was a powder keg waiting to explode. In 1882, the Triple Alliance was formed: Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy. Then, in 1907, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom joined the Triple Entente. Thus, Europe was divided into two large military blocs. Any local conflict could escalate into all-out war. Nationalism also played an important role. Many peoples wanted independence or to join other countries with whom they shared a language and culture. This was especially strong in the Balkans, where Serbs, Croats, and Bulgarians yearned to free themselves from Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman control. On June 28, 1914, an event occurred that would change everything: the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria in Sarajevo. The perpetrator was Gavrilo Princip, a young Serbian nationalist. This attack was the spark that ignited the greatest war the world had ever seen. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia for the murder and issued an ultimatum with harsh conditions. Serbia accepted some, but rejected others. Austria, with German support, declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. Thus began the conflict that would spread throughout the world. Russia, Serbia's ally, began mobilizing its army. Germany, Austria, Hungary's ally, declared war on Russia on August 1st. France, Russia's ally, prepared for war. Germany also declared war on France on August 3rd. All of Europe was in flames. Germany launched a plan called the Schlieffen Plan. Its idea was to quickly invade France through Belgium, then focus on Russia. But Belgium was a neutral country. When Germany invaded, the United Kingdom intervened and declared war on Germany on August 4, 1914. Within days, the most powerful countries in Europe were at war. Alliances fell like dominoes. What began as a conflict between Austria-Hungary and Serbia turned into a global war. People thought it would be short-lived. They were sorely mistaken. When the war began, millions of men were called up to fight. Many went excitedly, believing it would be a short adventure. They thought they'd be home by Christmas, but the reality of the battlefield would be very different. Modern warfare was not like any war that came before. Germany advanced rapidly through Belgium and northern France. However, the French and British managed to halt them at the Battle of the Marne in September 1914. This battle was crucial. Germany was forced to retreat, and the Western Front remained at a standstill. The Western Front became a fixed line. Both sides dug trenches to protect themselves. These trenches stretched for hundreds of kilometers, from the North Sea to Switzerland. Thus began the terrible trench warfare, a slow and very bloody form of warfare. The trenches were filled with mud, rats, disease, and fear. The soldiers lived under the rain, cold, and constant threat of shelling. The space between enemy trenches was called no man's land, and crossing it meant almost certain death. Every attempt to advance ended in thousands of deaths. Battles like Verdun and the Somme caused millions of casualties, with no side achieving a clear victory. Modern technology made warfare more destructive. Machine guns, heavy artillery, and poison gas changed everything. Meanwhile, on the Eastern Front, Germany and Austria-Hungary fought Russia. There weren't as many trenches there because the territory was larger. Although Russia had a huge army, it lacked modern weapons and supplies. Even so, it held strong in the first few years. In 1915, Italy broke its alliance with Germany and Austria-Hungary. It decided to join the Entente, hoping to gain territory. Italy opened a new front in the Alps, where fierce battles were fought against Austria. The mountainous terrain made the war even more difficult. The war spread beyond Europe. The Ottoman Empire, an ally of Germany, fought against the British and Russians in the Middle East. In 1915, the Ottomans successfully defended Gallipoli against a massive British and Australian attack. It was a major victory for them. Also in 1915, something terrible happened: the Armenian genocide. The Ottoman Empire persecuted and deported the Armenian population, accusing them of collaborating with the enemy. More than 1 million Armenians died. It was one of the most serious crimes of the 20th century. There were also clashes in Africa and Asia. The colonies of the European empires participated in the war. Soldiers from India, Africa, and other regions fought for their mother countries. Although many gave their lives, they were not always recognized as heroes. The war was also fought at sea. The United Kingdom used its powerful navy to blockade Germany. This meant ships could not carry food or supplies to German ports. This caused hunger and suffering among German civilians during the war. Germany responded with submarines, called U-boats. These attacked enemy ships without warning. They even sank civilian vessels. One of the most famous cases was the sinking of the Lusitania in 1915, which killed more than 1,000 people, including American citizens. The sinking of the Lusitania outraged the United States, but the country had not yet entered the war. President Woodrow Wilson sought to keep his nation neutral. However, with each German submarine attack, domestic pressure to intervene grew. The year 1916 began with weariness and despair on all fronts. The war had already raged for more than a year and a half. Millions had died. However, instead of seeking peace, countries planned new offensives. The first major battle of the year was one of the bloodiest, Verdun. On February 21, 1916, Germany launched its offensive at Verdun in northeastern France. The objective was to bleed dry the French army. German General Falkenhayn declared, "We must kill as many Frenchmen as possible." This marked the beginning of a brutal battle that would last nearly 10 months. Verdun held great symbolic value for the French. It was a fortified city and a symbol of resistance. The French government could not afford to lose it. Therefore, they decided to defend it at all costs. General Pétain was placed in command and promised, "They shall not pass." During the first days of the German offensive at Verdun, more than 1 million shells fell on French positions. The sky was covered with smoke and fire. Trenches disappeared under the bombardment. The soldiers lived through a living hell. In late February and early March 1916, German troops managed to advance slowly. They captured Fort Douaumont, one of Verdun's key strongholds. It was a severe blow to the French. However, the defense held firm in other sectors. On March 6, 1916, Germany launched a new attack on the left flank of the Verdun front. This time, they focused on the Cumières Forest and Le Mort-Homme Hill. Conditions were horrendous. Mud and bodies littered the ground. In April 1916, the French organized counterattacks to regain positions. General Pétain constantly rotated troops to prevent them from mentally collapsing. This system was called La Noria, resembling a spinning wheel that gives the soldiers a rest. On May 8, 1916, the Germans captured Fort Vaux. The French defense was heroic. Commander Raynal held out until the last moment without water or ammunition. Upon surrendering, the Germans respected him as a brave enemy. In June 1916, the fight for Verdun continued. The French launched attacks to recapture the lost forts. Despite their attrition, they refused to surrender. Verdun had become a national symbol. Losing it would be like losing the soul of France. In total, the Battle of Verdun lasted from February 21st to December 18th, 1916. There were more than 700,000 casualties, including dead, wounded, and missing. All of this was achieved in just a few kilometers of land. But for France, Verdun was a moral victory. While France and Germany were fighting at Verdun on the Eastern Front, Russia was preparing a major offensive. In June 1916, Russian General Alexei Brusilov launched one of the most successful attacks of the war, the Brusilov offensive against the Austro-Hungarian army in Galicia, today Ukraine. The Brusilov offensive began on June 4, 1916. Russia used new tactics, surprise attacks, silent preparation, and large numbers of men. Within days, the Austro-Hungarian lines collapsed. It was a disaster for Austria-Hungary. To help its ally, Austria, Germany had to send troops east, weakening the Verdun front. The Brusilov offensive was a tactical success for Russia, although it also resulted in heavy casualties. It showed that Russia could still strike hard. During the summer of 1916, on the Italian front, Italy launched several attacks against Austria in the Isonzo mountain region. Between August and November, the 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th battles of the Isonzo were fought. It was a war fought in freezing and harsh conditions. In the 6th Battle of the Isonzo, in August 1916, Italy managed to capture the city of Gorizia. It was a symbolic but limited victory. The mountainous terrain made progress difficult. Both sides suffered from the cold, snow, and constant bombardment. In the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire was fighting the British in Mesopotamia, present-day Iraq. In April 1916, the Ottomans achieved a major victory by forcing the surrender of the British army at Kut al-Amara after a long siege. The siege of Kut lasted from December 1915 to April 29, 1916. It was one of the British Empire's most humiliating defeats of the war. More than 13,000 British and Indian soldiers surrendered to the Ottomans, a major Turkish victory. That same year, the British reorganized their forces in the Middle East and planned new campaigns. In June 1916, the Arab Revolt also began, led by Sheriff Hussein of Mecca with British support. They sought to liberate Arabia from Ottoman control. The Arab Revolt was supported by the British officer T.E. Lawrence, known as Lawrence of Arabia. The Arabs captured several cities and attacked Turkish railway lines. This movement would grow in the following years. In the Balkans, Romania decided to enter the war on the side of the Entente. On August 27, 1916, Romania declared war on Austria-Hungary, hoping to gain Transylvania. But Germany, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire counterattacked with force, invading its territory. After entering the war in August 1916, Romania rapidly advanced toward Transylvania. At first, it seemed likely it would succeed, but Germany, Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, and the Ottoman Empire launched a joint counterattack in September. The situation quickly changed. In September and October 1916, Central Power troops pushed the Romanians southward. Bucharest, the capital of Romania, was occupied by the Germans on December 6, 1916. It was a major victory for Germany and its allies on the Balkan front. Meanwhile, on the Caucasus front between Russia and the Ottoman Empire, intense fighting raged in cold, mountainous conditions. In early 1916, the Russian army captured the Ottoman city of Erzurum in February and then Trebizond in April. Russian victories in the Caucasus weakened the Ottoman Empire's position in the region. Many Ottoman soldiers died or were taken prisoner. The war in this region also led to the displacement of thousands of civilians and a major humanitarian crisis. On a political level, a major change occurred in the United Kingdom. On December 7, 1916, Prime Minister Herbert Asquith resigned due to domestic pressure. He was replaced by David Lloyd George, who took more decisive steps to organize the war effort. Lloyd George reorganized the British war industry, increased munitions production, and improved military coordination. He also promoted a closer alliance with France and encouraged the use of tanks, aircraft, and new military tactics to break the stalemate. On the Western Front, in addition to Verdun, another major battle began in July 1916, the Battle of the Somme. It was launched by the British and French to relieve pressure on Verdun. It began on July 1, 1916, and lasted until November. July 1, 1916, the first day of the Somme, was the bloodiest in the history of the British Army. In just 24 hours, more than 57,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded. It was a brutal clash with the reality of modern warfare. During the Battle of the Somme, the British used tanks for the first time on September 15, 1916. Although they were slow and failed often, they demonstrated a new type of technology that would change the battlefield in the future. La Batalla del Somme terminó el 18 de noviembre de 1916. Los aliados ganaron poco terreno, apenas unos kilómetros, pero hubo más de 1.2 millones de bajas entre ambos bandos. Fue otra muestra de lo costosa que era esta guerra de trincheras. By the end of 1916, Europe was exhausted. Hundreds of thousands of men had died at Verdun and the Somme. Romania had been occupied. The Russian front had made progress, but at great cost. The Ottoman Empire was holding out in the Middle East. No one saw an end to the war in sight. In European countries, the war was no longer seen as a glorious adventure. Millions of families suffered from the loss of sons, brothers, and fathers. Food was scarce. There was rationing, lines to buy bread and coal, and growing popular discontent. In France, General Pétain was hailed as a hero for his defense of Verdun. In Germany, political power began to concentrate in the hands of Generals Hindenburg and Ludendorff, who took almost complete control of the war effort beginning in August 1916. The war press in 1916 was censored. Governments did not allow the true magnitude of the tragedy to be shown. Images were controlled, and newspapers spoke of patriotism, bravery, and small victories, often obscuring the horror of the front. In culture, despite the chaos, there was art. Poets like Wilfred Owen and Siegfried Sassoon began to write about the real suffering of soldiers. In cinema, short propaganda films were made to encourage citizens. Everything revolved around the conflict. The year 1917 began with despair. The soldiers were exhausted, and many civilians were starving. There was uncertainty on every front, but no country wanted to surrender. This year was expected to be decisive, although no one knew how or when the war would end. On the Western Front, the Allies were preparing a major offensive. In April 1917, the Battle of Arras took place. The British attacked German positions in northern France. They were initially successful, but the advance halted after a few days. During the Battle of Arras, between April 9 and May 16, 1917, Canadians fought bravely at the Battle of Vimy Ridge. It was a tactical victory for Canada and a key moment in its national history. They demonstrated unity and strength as a country. At the same time, the French launched the so-called Nivelle Offensive on April 16, 1917, promising a swift victory. The attack failed, with more than 100,000 French casualties in just a few weeks. The soldiers began to lose faith in their leaders. After the failure of the offensive, mutinies broke out in the French army in May 1917. Thousands of soldiers refused to attack. They didn't want to desert, but they didn't want to die pointlessly either. It was a critical moment that forced the government to act. General Pétain replaced General Nivelle as commander. Pétain restored discipline, but also improved conditions. more rest, better food, and promises to stop pointless attacks. With this, the morale of the French army was gradually restored. On the Eastern Front, Russia was experiencing a political turmoil. The Russian people were fed up with Tsar Nicholas II. War, hunger, and inequality